Welcome back to When Harry Met Board Games, where we feed our people with relatable content, and our victory condition is your satisfaction. I'm Harry, and today we have another top 10 list for you all. Today I'm going to be sharing with you my top 10 thematic Euro games. These are Euro-style board games that happen to be more thematic than your average. Yes, lots of Euros are not known for their thematic integration or their immersive experience. And while I'm not saying that these games rival the thematic flavor of their Ameritrash counterparts, I am saying that these are the 10 Euro style games that best help me get into the theme. So without any further ado, let's get straight to the list. My number 10 thematic Euro game is Pillars of the Earth, designed by Michael Rieneck and Stefan Stadler and published by Cosmos Games. And lots of the people who play Pillars of the Earth perhaps cannot appreciate its thematic flavor because lots of the people who play this game have not actually read the novels or watched the TV series. I'm not saying all people have not, but lots of people haven't. And it's because it's such a good game on its own right. It doesn't need to depend on that theme. However, I do find that they find an interesting way of integrating the theme. First of all, we do have the tangible pieces that make up the cathedral. And although the cathedral is nothing more than a prop in this game, it simply serves to keep track of all the rounds. There are 6 rounds, therefore there are 6 wooden pieces that make up the cathedral. Although it's used in such a superfluous way, I find that it does add to the thematic immersiveness. You have this beautiful board that transports you to the land. You have these amazing chunky wooden pieces, but on top of the cathedral, which again, as I mentioned earlier, has really no impact on gameplay, you also have this particular phase at the beginning of each round, which is called the event phase. And at the event phase, you draw one card, and that one card somehow alters the rules for that current round. And it's interesting because each of the different event cards corresponds with something that happened in the novels, some part of some type of narrative or story that actually occurred in the novels, and you get to relive them through those event cards. Also, you have some different character cards in this game, and the different character cards help you in different ways. And again, those characters help you in ways that kind of correspond to the personalities and the roles that these characters actually played in the original novels. So again, there's all these interesting ways of just kind of alluding to the subject matter, which is Ken Follett's novel, Pillars of the Earth, and I find that it does a good job of representing that. So now I'm not going to say that this game is the most thematically immersive game of them all, which is why it's only ranked number 10 on this list, but if you have some exposure to the Pillars of the Earth novel or drama series, this is a good game to relive that kind of story. My number 10 thematic Euro, Pillars of the Earth. My number 9 thematic Euro is Cleopatra and the Society of Architects. This game designed by Bruno Cathala and Ludovic Mablanc and originally published by Days of Wonder Games. Not too long ago, there was a second edition, a beautiful, gorgeous production out on Kickstarter. Again, not too long ago. I do own a copy of the game, but I do not have it on me at this moment, so I will show you guys some images so you can get an idea what the game looks like. This game basically has an Egyptian theme, and players take on the role of architects trying to win over the favor of Cleopatra by contributing towards the building of her palaces, her gardens, and all of the decorations that adorn them. And basically they're doing this by recruiting a workforce and other resources that they will need in order to build these different edifices. And basically they're trying to do so in an efficient way, but at the same time they're also trying to do it in as honest a way as possible, because throughout the game you're gonna do some sly and evil deeds, you're gonna accrue some corruption throughout the way, but the player who accrues the most corruption at the end of the game is actually going to be offered up to the crocodiles, Cleopatra's crocodiles, and they're not even going to factor into the end game. Even if they have the most points or the most money at the end of the game, they're not even going to count because they accrued so much corruption along the way. So you want to do so, you want to be efficient, but you do not want to accrue too much corruption. Now, the interesting thing about this game is that the gameplay is not necessarily so thematic. It's really the aesthetic appeal of this game. You have these 3-dimensional pieces that make up the game. First of all, the box of the game actually serves as part of the game board, and you place the gardens of Cleopatra on top of it, and you build these nice little walls around it, and you build these nice little sphinxes around it, and you're building these little patches within the gardens, creating these nice little sanctuaries. You're doing all these cool little things or these beautiful looking pieces. You have these tall little obelisks that you're placing as well. All these nice three-dimensional pieces really bring you into that Egyptian atmosphere. So again, this is one of those games that's not necessarily the mechanisms that make it feel so thematic, but it's actually the components and how they're integrated into the gameplay that make it feel like a very thematic experience. My number 9 thematic Euro, Cleopatra and the Society of Architects. My number 8 thematic Euro is Dice Hospital. And this is such a cool game because players are basically running their own hospital and they're competing with all the other players around the table and their individual hospitals, and you're trying to recruit the right amount of staff, basically different specialists, different physicians that specialize in different diseases. And although the game does not necessarily well, they do actually use the different terms of the different physicians, the different specialists. You have a microbiologist, right? You have a virologist. You have all these different types of specialists, and they're color-coded to correspond with the different dice. This game's called Dice Hospital, so your patients are actually dice. And you have green, yellow, and red dice, and they kind of correspond with different types of illnesses. And again, you got green, red, and yellow specialists. You also have some generalists who are helpful. They're blue-colored cards and blue-colored meeples that you use in order to activate your worker placement spots. And basically, each player has their own little player board, which is their hospital. And the hospital consists of several different units, and these units are your worker placement spots. And each of these give you or grant you a different way of treating patients. Sometimes it's color-specific. Sometimes it's number-specific. Sometimes it allows you to treat more than one patient at a time. Sometimes these specialists allow you to treat more than one patient at a time. Or sometimes the units and or specialists allow you to treat one patient multiple times. And basically what you're trying to do is you're trying to bring them to healing, to health, treat them all the way up to the point that they get past the number 6, because these are 6-sided dice. If they go below 1, that patient dies. It's a casualty. It's a mortality token that you'll have to place in the mortuary, and you're going to lose points or have points deducted for that at the end of the game. But if you can get them to 6 and higher, then they become healed, and you have to discharge them. And the more patients you're able to discharge at the same time, the more points you're going to score. So you do not want to discharge little by little. You actually want to discharge in big chunks, in big clusters, in order to score more points. It is a really cool game, and the thematic aspect of this game is not so much how you treat disease and how the dice correspond with ill or sick patients. It's really the business side of the healthcare system. The idea that your hospital only has a certain amount of capacity for these sick patients, and eventually, if you want to be efficient, you've got to do your best to take care of them, to treat them, to not neglect them in order to discharge them. You can't have them there in your hospital permanently. So it's really that side of things, trying to be as efficient of a manager, of a operator as possible, as you're kind of overseeing the management of your hospital and making sure that you have a good balance of specialists, a good balance of additional units to amplify and enhance your hospital as your worker placement spots. Doing this in an efficient manner so you could discard patients in a timely fashion at the end of the rounds in order to score the most points as possible. Again, as a person who actually worked in the healthcare industry for some time, I appreciate this theme even more. And again, it brings me into that world. My number 8 thematic Euro, Dice Hospital. And now we move on to my number 7 thematic Euro. My number 7 thematic Euro of all time is Kikkclotties, designed by Bruno Cathala and Ludovic Mablanc. Again, I do not have my copy of this game on me right now, but this game here is basically a Greek-themed game where each player takes on one of the Greek nations, fighting over the control of the Kikkclotties Islands. And they're doing so by trying to win over the favor of the different gods within the Greek pantheon. And you have 5 different gods in this game, in the base game at least. You have Poseidon, you have Ares, you have Zeus, and you have Athena, and you have Apollo. And you're always, in the beginning of each turn, you're having a bid, not only for turn order, but also for which god you will control during that round. And each god has a different way of benefiting you. Namely, they have ways of giving you particular buildings, which is the most important aspect of this game, because you're trying to build a certain cluster of buildings in order to turn them into a metropolis. And the first player to have 2 metropolises at the end of a round is the winner of the game. So again, those gods and getting those different buildings of their respective color types is very important. But the gods also grant you additional abilities like the ability to recruit troops on the board, recruit navy ships on the board. They also grant you the ability to recruit priests and philosophers who are helpful for allowing you to get discounts in future auctions or for getting another way of getting a metropolis into your possession. And this game involves a nice, neat attack emphasis on it because you're attacking opponents. You're trying to go into their islands and take over their islands so you could get their money that they're generating at the beginning of each round, but also so you could get whatever buildings they're in control of, in particular their metropolises, right? But the only way that you can really effectively and efficiently succeed in combat is if you find a good way of using Poseidon and Ares in tandem, because you need to have a network of navy ships that connect island to island in order to transport your land troops from one island to another. So you're going to have to use Ares in order to build that naval fleet that's going to allow you to connect to multiple islands, and you're going to need to utilize Ares wisely in order to recruit enough troops in order to be able to disperse them to different islands and attack in an effective manner. Really cool, really fun. It just, I love the Greek theme. I'm a big fan of the Greek theme, and I just love how all the different gods are so, the way that they help you is so in harmony with what we've heard of them, the myths and stories that we've heard of them, the legends that we've heard of them since we were little kids about Ares being the god of war. Well, guess what? He gives you land troops and he gives you the opportunity to partake in battle, right? So it's just amazing, just immersing myself in that Greek mythology experience. And because of that, Kikkclotties is my number 7 thematic Euro of all time. My number 6 thematic Euro game of all time is Agricola, designed by Uwe Rosenberg, and this game here is about agricultural life in like 11th century Europe, right? We're talking about late Dark Ages, medieval times, and basically things were really tough back then. It was hard to feed a family, which is why this game has such an emphasis on feeding your people. You have to, at the end of each harvest round, have enough meals to supply to each of your family members, or if not, you're going to take negative points, starvation or beggar points. So you got to factor that all in. And this game is such a tight and stingy game, which I very much appreciate. I know lots of people don't. And it actually is relevant to its theme because, again, we're trying to simulate not only agricultural life, but we're not trying to simulate 21st century American prosperity agricultural life. No, we're trying to simulate 11th century European agricultural life, and things were much harder back then. There was no guarantee that your children would grow up to see adulthood. So again, this is a really cool, realistic way of implementing that. I'm not a big fan in real life of agricultural aspects or themes. I'm not really a big fan of planting or harvesting or any of that stuff, but this game makes me a fan. While I'm immersed in this game, I enjoy it, and it feels so realistic. It feels like I'm breeding my animals. It feels like I'm reaping my crops. It feels like I'm growing and expanding my house in order to accommodate for a larger family. It feels like I'm sending my young children out to the fields in order to work them for me. All of these things just feel very realistic to me. And again, the components are a very helpful thing. Obviously, with Euro games, when the components can have some type of shape to them, when it's not just some type of cube or block or disc, it adds and enhances the thematic experience. Now, Agricola did originally come with cubes and discs, but the more modern editions come with meeples and veggie meeples. So you have these wooden pieces that represent animals and veggies, but they actually are carved out and shaped to look and represent these things. So again, that absolutely helps. I also have these customized, I believe it's WizKids who produced it, these customized miniature pieces for your family members, which again further enhances the thematic experience for me, which is why Agricola is my number 6 thematic Euro game of all time. And now we move on to the top 5, the cream of the crop. And my number 5 thematic Euro of all time is 1960, The Making of a President, designed by Christian Leonard and Jason Matthews. And this game basically recreates the election, the presidential election of 1960 between John F. Kennedy and Richard Nixon. And one player basically takes on the role of John F. Kennedy. The other player takes on Richard Nixon. It's a 2-player only game. And basically you are campaigning all over America in order to win the support of the different constituencies. And you're doing so through the use of card play. This game the main mechanism is this card play, these multi-purpose cards that you could either use to carry out their events. They have lots of historical events, and there's lots of text that kind of alludes to the things that were transpiring or taking place back in the late 50s and early 1960s and the relevant issues of those times. And you can carry it out for those events if the card has your character symbol on it, right? Your political party symbol. So if you're the Republican player, you need an elephant, a red elephant. If you are the Democratic player, you need a blue donkey. And as long as your party symbol is on that card, you can carry it out for its event. However, if not, you could also choose to use those cards for their campaign points. And all the cards have a different amount of campaign points. And you can use your campaign points to recruit support in the different states. You could also use them to pay for your transportation, because while traveling within a given region of one color is absolutely free, once you cross over into a different region, you have to pay campaign points in order to do so. So if you want to get all the way from one side of the country to another side of the country, it's going to cost you a pretty penny, and you're going to need those campaign points. So again, you could utilize those cards for those campaign points. And basically, you're doing all these things, and you're trying to, again, gather as much support in all the different states. Sometimes you're trying to carry the states by having lots of support there. And if you carry a state, when a player tries to gain support in a state that you're carrying, they can't just automatically gain support there. Instead, they're going to have to partake in this blind draw from a bag, all right? Because you're using your cubes to represent your support. But you have these cubes in this bag that you will draw from time to time when you have to do a support check. And again, you're drawing from them blindly, and you're hoping that your color cube comes out. Because if your color cube comes out, then you successfully got that support added to your character and to your political party in that location. And it's so cool because thematically speaking, all the different states have a different allocation of electoral college votes, and you want to factor that in your campaigning. You do not necessarily want to waste so much time or invest so much effort into a state that's only going to give you 3 or 4 electoral votes. Sure, you can get it easily, you'll take it, but you're going to put your emphasis on the states that are going to give you 20, 30, maybe even 40 electoral votes at the end of the game, because the first player to cross the 270 threshold at the end of the game is going to be the winner. And it's really cool because there's even a debate round. There's one round that's designated just for debating, and that's one round that plays very much differently from all the other rounds. So again, it integrates everything you can think of from a presidential election perspective, and it really gets you in that mood. Every time I play this game, and by the way, every time I've played, I've won. Every time I win this game, I feel like I truly am the president of the United States of America. My number 5 thematic Euro of all time, 1960, The Making of a President. My number 4 thematic Euro of all time is Raiders of the North Sea, designed by Shem Phillips. And this game here has a Viking theme, which is a very popular theme nowadays. And I find that for a Euro game, it carries out or executes this theme to perfection. Basically, players are all part of the same Viking tribe, but they're trying to independently raid these different parts of the map, these outposts, these monasteries, these fortresses, in order to recover loot from there and take it back to their tribal chieftain as an offering. And basically, the tribal chieftain is asking for very specific, particular combinations of these resources, and based on what they're asking, they're going to give you a certain amount of victory points. So players are always trying to get the most valuable of those offering tiles from the chieftain. But along the way, this is a worker placement game, and you always are putting down one worker at a location, carrying out its action, and then you're picking up another worker. And if you chose to work and go to the village, then that means you're going to execute 2 actions on your turn. And mapping that out is really, really the heart of the game, because you want to kind of set yourself up for a future turn, or hope that your opponents set you up for a future turn so you can carry out the action that you prefer. But also, there's 3 different types of meeples in this game. You have your black colored meeples, your gray colored meeples, and your white colored meeples. And some locations require very specific colors for you to go there. So again, you always want to make sure that the Viking or the meeple that you're picking up at the end of your turn is the one that's going to set you up for the action, the first action that you want to take the next time that you have a turn. So that's really cool from a mechanical perspective. But as far as from the thematic perspective, I just feel like I'm going on different raids and like I'm trying to outdo my fellow Viking players around the table. I also like the implementation of the Valkyrie here, which are represented by these black wooden pieces. And basically, every time you raid a location that has a Valkyrie or more Valkyries, one or more Valkyries, you're going to suffer casualties. Your crew members are going to be sent to Valhalla. And basically, for each Valkyrie that was on that location, you're going to have to sacrifice one of your crew members and they're going to die. And you paid silver. You paid an expensive price to add those crew members to your player area, to your ships, basically. And now they're going to suffer the casualties. But again, what's interesting about this Valkyrie system here is that you have this Valkyrie track on the board. And as you lose your crew members to the Valkyrie, your score or your piece on the Valkyrie track is going to increase and it's going to go up. And the higher your piece is on that Valkyrie track, the more points you're going to be rewarded at the end of the game. So on top of getting lots of victory points through the raiding of these different locations and through the bringing back offerings to your tribal chieftain, you're also going to get victory points by actually suffering the consequences, having the courage and the bravery to have crew members who sacrifice their lives in order to accomplish these raids. So again, all of that is really cool, and it kind of brings me into the flavor of the Viking theme. My number 4 thematic Euro of all time, Raiders of the North Sea. My number 3 thematic Euro game of all time is The Pursuit of Happiness. And this is basically referred to by many people as the game of life for gamers, because basically in this game, players are just simply trying to live their best lives, like we all are, right? And basically this is a worker placement game where all the worker placement spots involve some type of aspect of real human life. You are trying to partake in projects because that's what people do. You're trying to accrue different items, valuable possessions throughout the game because that's what we do. You're trying to partake in different activities, enjoyable, therapeutic, life-enhancing activities. You're also trying to get a job because you need a job to pay the bills. And you're also trying to find significant others to date, marry, and maybe even start a family with. And all of these aspects of gameplay are going to contribute to your long-term happiness. And your long-term happiness is simply another way of saying your victory points in this game. And this game is so cool because everything you do just feels so realistic. It feels like you are living your life. It feels like I am actually trying to write a novel or run for a political office, or I am trying to partake in some sort of health regimen that's going to help me be the healthiest person and live a very long life. Or perhaps I'm going to start a comic book collection or a board game collection or a wine collection, or I'm going to go golfing, or I'm going to buy a motorcycle, or I'm going to buy a house and upgrade it to a mansion. All these things feel so realistic. Also, the demands of a significant other and their expectations, because not everybody's going to want to date you if you don't have certain criteria. You don't fulfill certain criteria. Some of the options available for your significant others, they're not even going to look your way, right? Much less marry you and have children. But here's the thing. Having a job is going to consume your time because your worker placement pieces are represented by these sand timers, which represent the fact that we need time in order to accomplish the things that we want to do in life. But as you accrue jobs and relationships, these things are actually going to take away from your sand timers at the beginning of each round, because relationships and jobs are time consuming. Therefore, going forward, you're going to have less of your worker placement spots, pieces available to you. And all these things accrue stress. If you try to do too much with your life, you're going to accrue stress. And if you accrue stress, not only is that going to give you fewer actions going forward in the future, but it's also going to shorten your lifespan, because this game does not have a fixed amount of rounds. I mean, it has a maximum of 8 rounds, representing all the decades of your life. However, you might actually die long before that. You might die by the 5th round, or typically more often you die around the 6th round. But you could also do things to decrease your stress, to rest, to relax, to bring you some relief. And this will also perhaps enhance or increase the chances of you living a longer life. And if you live a longer life, the chances are that you're going to score more long-term happiness, right? So again, this game really brings me into that spirit of trying to live my life, make certain decisions. Perhaps sometimes I go with a life that seems a little bit more realistic to what I live my real life, which is not necessarily the most exciting. But other times I actually try to be a little bit more creative and risky and try making decisions and doing things in my life in this game that I would never actually try to pursue in real life. And it's such a fun experience sometimes role playing through this game and living a totally different life, different lifestyle than you would have ever imagined that you would live in actuality. Again, really cool, really fun. From a thematic perspective, it just really gets me in there. My number 3 thematic Euro of all time, The Pursuit of Happiness. And now we move on to my number 2 thematic Euro of all time, and that is Wingspan by Elizabeth Hargrave and published by Stonemaier Games. And this game here, basically players are running their nature reserves and they are recruiting different birds to place into the different habitats. And there's 3 different types of habitats. You got your forests, you got your plains, and you got your waters. And basically all the different birds in this game can either be placed in one or the other of these habitats. There are some birds that are a little bit more versatile and allow you to choose among 2 different habitats, maybe even all 3. And it's so cool because as the game progresses, you're producing eggs, you're laying eggs on all these birds, which are going to increase the value of those birds at the end of the game and score you more victory points. And you're also trying to get the necessary food tokens in order to acquire and feed for these birds so that you can place them in your nature reserve. And again, this game feels so thematic because you learn so much about birds in this game, and all of the different birds in these cards are very well researched. You see their different wingspans, you see the capacity or how much eggs they typically lay in 1 year. You know what parts of the world and what regions they tend to live in. You also know what foods they prefer or it makes up their diet. Therefore, those are the tokens that you're trying to get every time you want to place one of those birds in your nature reserve board. It's so cool. It really brings me into the zone of watching for birds and trying to just take care of them. It really is a neat experience, and looking at those nice 3-dimensional eggs really adds to the experience. Kind of like I mentioned earlier, the components of a Euro game can really add to the thematic feel of it, right? Because those eggs, if they would have just been 2-dimensional tokens, would have not felt nearly as cool. But since they're nice, chunky little 3-dimensional pieces, colorful pieces at that, it just really brings you into that zone. My number 2 thematic Euro game of all time, Wingspan. And now we move on to my number 1, the most thematic Euro game as far as I'm concerned, at least of those that I played. And here's the thing, guys. This game is not my favorite Euro game. It's not my favorite from among these that I presented today. As a matter of fact, I would say most of the games on this list, I would prefer them over this game in a vacuum. However, I do feel that of all these games, this is the one that most brings me into the theme that it's trying to convey. And with all that being said, my number 1 thematic Euro game of all time is Tikal by Wolfgang Kramer and Michael Kiesling. And I have this old Real Grand edition. I believe that if I had the Super Meeple edition, I would be even more convinced of how thematic this game is. Because as I mentioned, the components of a game truly enhance its thematic immersiveness. And the modern Super Meeple edition, they have 3-dimensional chunky temple pieces, while in this game you simply have hexagonal tiles, or actually square-shaped tiles that represent your temples and their different levels. So, but even so, this game just, I feel like I am on an expedition through the Mayan jungles, cutting down trees and excavating temples and exploring the lands for artifacts. I literally feel like I am doing these things. I'm feeling like I encountered a volcano and it's like, oh no, there's a volcano. And all of a sudden we have a scoring round. I feel like all these things are actually taking place. I feel the competitive urge of trying to have my group, my expedition be more successful than all those around the table. Again, I just feel every aspect of this game from a thematic perspective. Even this old Rio Grande edition for its time was a nice looking game. It's a colorful looking game. Your explorers are represented by these wooden cylinder-shaped pieces, so it doesn't really feel too thematic from that perspective. If they were meeples, it probably would feel a little bit more thematic. But again, every action that you do in this game really brings me into that zone, and I feel like I'm exploring these lands, and I'm truly on some type of archaeological venture. My number 1 thematic Euro game of all time Tikal. And that's it for today's list, folks. Thank you so much for joining us here at When Harry Met Board Games. Please comment down below and tell me what you think is the most thematic Euro game you've ever played, and which of these games does not feel thematic at all to you. I'm interested in reading what you guys have to say. This is Harry saying take care, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy, and have fun gaming. Bye.